Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you confirm you can hear me? Kindly confirm that you can hear us and see us, please.
Yes, Prof.
Okay, great. We will start in the next minute, just waiting for the rest of the people to join. أكتر شيء بعتقد فينا نقعد ما بدك دكتور فينا نقرب كمان هذا هو أسوأ وقت للإضاءة بالنهار.
ما تحطها بالنص هيك بدك على الطاولة كليا هذيك إذا بدك يعني. Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for logging in. As we agreed before, we have Dr. Fouad Abi Nader joining us today, who will be speaking to us. This is not the first time he speaks to my class. Actually, last year he did the same. But today we have a better chance to explore many of the issues that we already spoke about and read about in our readings, particularly to try to understand Lebanese history, but more importantly, try to understand what got us to the 1975 civil war. Dr. Abi Nader is an UB graduate. He's a medical doctor. He doesn't practice anymore, but he was also heavily involved in Lebanese politics and still is. And he was also the commander of the Lebanese forces at a certain stage in the war. And he was and still is a member of the Lebanese Kata'ib party. So you will have a better chance to actually ask him as a young person growing up in Lebanon before the war and during the war, as well as many of the different schools of thought that we spoke about, the Cairo Accord, the 1943 National Pact. And we can explore more and more to try to understand what went wrong, why in 1975 the system collapsed, or why did we have the political confrontation turn into a bloody confrontation, and to try to understand about, more importantly, the power sharing formula that came out of the Taif agreement. although Dr. Abu Nader wasn't the head of the Lebanese forces during the Taif agreement, but many of the things in Taif were discussed throughout the war, as well as we can explore any point that you might be. No, Maha, to answer you, Dr. Abu Nader will tell you he does not have a party. He has an NGO that does a lot of development and outreach to the regions. He is currently a member of the Lebanese Kataib party, and I think he sits on the Politburo. Not, but he is a member of the Lebanese Kataib party, and obviously he is no longer in the Lebanese forces, because, as you know, the Lebanese force during the war was a militia, not a party. And you will have the chance to talk to him. I would like to thank Dr. Abu Nader for coming here and invite him to speak to the class.
Yes, hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Makram, and welcome for everyone. I'm going to make like a short presentation about my involvement, a little bit, a kind of testimony, and then I'll prefer that you have the questions, you have your own questions, and then we'll have an interactive session, so everybody will participate, and you will have your own questions, and I'll be delighted to answer to them. So just to give you a brief idea, I was in AUB in 1974, and before that I joined the Kataib party in the early 70s, and my main motivation at that time was that as a young person, a young Christian person, I used to live in an area where we had Palestinian camps, and every time I had to go up to my hometown, my village, I used to go through the Tel Zatar camp, and every time the Palestinians used to stop us and ask for our IDs. I'm saying this around 1969, where we had a major clash between the Lebanese army and the Palestinians at that time. And the Palestinians, after this, we were obliged as Lebanese to go to Cairo and to sign the infamous Cairo Accord at that time. The problem in Lebanon, just to give you a brief thing, the main problem and the main richness of Lebanon is the 18 communities in Lebanon. At that time, having 18 communities in Lebanon was a liability, because the different communities didn't have an agreement on how we are seeing Lebanon, the future of Lebanon. And there were even some parties in Lebanon who never wanted to have Lebanon as a full country, as an independent country. So at that time there were a lot of problems between the different parties and different communities in Lebanon based on this particular matter.
Go ahead.
Okay, so at that time the Lebanese government was obliged, because there is half of the country which were mainly the Muslim communities, and at that time also all the some parties also in Lebanon, they have put a lot of pressure on the Lebanese government to go and accept and to sign the agreement in Cairo. This agreement in Cairo, we
gave away part, or relinquished.
Yeah, we relinquished part of our sovereignty in Lebanon, and the Palestinians had at that time the right to do almost whatever they want in Lebanon, and to go to the southern part of Lebanon to attack Israel, to train their people, and they succeeded to make like a country or a government within the Lebanese government, and to create a no-go zone in the Palestinian camps. So the Lebanese government was not able to enter the Palestinian camps and to do anything there. So the Palestinians grew stronger and stronger, and they were having also the they had also the influence on the Lebanese parties and on the Lebanese personalities in Lebanon.
Also, Black September had happened in Jordan.
Yeah, September happened in 1970. So 1960, I'm just talking about 1969, 1969. So we were obliged to sign the accord. And particularly one of the things just after 1969, when things were calmer at that time, I was going with my parents. I was 13 years old. The Palestinian barrage stopped us and they asked for our IDs. And I was shocked to see that there were Palestinians asking me in my country for my ID. So for me, it was my first encounter with the Palestinians armed militia. 1970, Black September in Jordan, the king kicked out all the Palestinian armed forces, and they all came to Lebanon. Why the king was not obliged, the king of Jordan was not obliged to sign an accord like the Cairo Accord himself? Because he was a Muslim country. This is our explanation, because he had the power of saying no to the Palestinians, and no one will say that he is destroying the Palestinian cause. While in Lebanon, because there were a Christian president, sorry, I'm talking this way, because at that time, this was the mentality. I'm trying to plunge you in this, how some of the Lebanese were thinking here. So he had even the umbrella of the Israel at that time, who Israel has put a lot of pressure on the Syrians who were trying to come to help the Palestinians in Jordan. And at that time, the Jordanian army was able to gain on the ground, and they were kicked out. After this, when they came to Lebanon, they grew stronger and stronger at that time. And later on, during the years which led us to 1975, the Palestinians were almost controlling a big part of Lebanon. And at that time, in 1974, before 1975, the Palestinians were almost controlling Lebanon. The Lebanese army was put on the side. The first battle I did as a militia from within the Kataib party, I did my baptism of fire of fire in 1974, before the war started in 1975. Just to give you an idea, after this first clash with the Palestinian.
That's one thing. The father of Dr. Abu Nader is the founder of the Kataib party, Pierre Jmeil, the grandfather, and he is also the uncle. His uncle is Bashir, the famous Bashir Jmeil. So he is. Yeah. He was also privileged, but he also fought alongside the troops as a member of the Kataib party.
Yeah, just between brackets, no one knew that Pierre Jmeil was my grandfather until 1976 when I was wounded. Then the people realized this. Otherwise, I was like a normal fighter like everyone. I'm just giving you this idea just for you to understand.
We will go back to the questions later on. Yes, of course.
Just give me. I want to add two things here. The first thing is that I had my first experience in 1974, and after this clash that we had, there were like an agreement of ceasefire agreement, and in this ceasefire agreement, two policemen or two gendarmes were positioned. Two Palestinians and two Kataib. And I was one of these teams. And I realized then at that time that the Lebanese government was totally inexistent, and that we were entering in a phase which was very difficult. The second thing I want to say, I don't agree that to label this war as a civil war. The war which started in 1975 to 1990. I prefer to use to label it as the Lebanese wars, because it's not always Lebanese were fighting Lebanese, because we were fighting Palestinians and Syrians. The other people were fighting against Israelis. So there were a lot of foreign armies on ground, and we're fighting these foreign armies. This is why I prefer to call it like the Lebanese wars, and maybe 10 or 20% were a civil war between Lebanese themselves. So بدك نحكي
whatever, sir.
okay. I want to end my presentation by saying two things. The first thing, you have to understand that at that time there were the Cold War, and if you go down from the Cold War, there were the differences between the different communities in Lebanon, and between them you had the leftist parties, the right parties, the Arab nationalists, you know, you name it. At that time you had all these big big number of parties and ideas and ideologies, so you have to keep this in mind. The second thing, at that time there were a focus, me as a Christian, how we perceived this. We thought at that time that we never thought that we are going to take the role of the Lebanese army. We always thought that the militias, which were labeled as rightist at that time, we were going to help the Lebanese army. We never thought we are going to replace the Lebanese government as well. So we were shocked to see that in 1975, the Lebanese government was totally neutralized and the Lebanese army was neutralized. So with all these big game that was happening worldwide and at the regional level, we were like very, very small within this game, you know. And the second thing I want to tell you is that the Lebanese, especially the Christians and the Lebanese who were really eager to keep the Lebanese independence at that time, we were shocked to see that the Palestinians took a major stand against the existence of Lebanon. For instance, Abu Ayyad, the number 2 of PLO at that time, he said it several times that the road to Jerusalem goes through Jounieh, which was, if you want to translate it, we are going to throw to the sea the Christians and take over Lebanon. So this was, if you want, the major
Obsession.
Yeah, obsession within the Christian communities. The second thing is that at that time, some Muslim clerics at that time, mainly Sunni clerics, used to repeat that we consider that the Palestinians are the army of the Muslims of Lebanon. We don't recognize the Lebanese army as such. So when you come and you add all these things, you add all the dots, you end up by having all the ingredients for a major clash in Lebanon.
Just, I would like to draw your attention that many of the things that Dr. Abi Nader is saying, he is saying what they used to think at the time.
Of course.
We are not saying that these are essential facts that one should take into our modern day interpretation, but in order to understand why these things happened, he's trying to tell you his own personal experience as a young man growing up in Lebanon and as a member of what we term the pro-establishment political parties in Lebanon. In no way he is trying to defend what later on would happen, because I have some interaction over Facebook. People are using what Dr. Abi Nader is saying to try to use it in our day-to-day lives. We are here in a history class and we are talking about things that we read about to try to understand what went wrong, what happened in 1975, and why the power sharing formula. And this is where I would like to invite Dr. Abi Nader to talk to us about the الميثاق الوطني, the National Pact, and why did Bashir Jmail and his group, which Dr. Abi Nader belonged to, did not see that the National Pact was viable in the 1970s? What went wrong for them to stand up to what essentially was a Kata'ib credo? The Kata'ib, as a Lebanese party, they believe in the National Pact and they are there to protect the National Pact. So if we can tell us more about what happened so a younger generation of Kata'ib members would stand up to this traditional 1943 formula.
Yeah, at that time, there were people within the Christian community thinking that this formula is dead, that it was not possible to create a real coexistence between the different communities in Lebanon. And later on, when we went through 1977, 78, 79, at that time, the mentality has started to change in Lebanon. And the major clashes or the major events were happening not between Lebanese anymore. It was happening more and more between either the Palestinians, who were thinking about having Lebanon as a Hanoi, through which they are going to be able to reconquer Saigon, which was Israel. And later on, the clashes started with the Syrian army, especially after Sadat went to Jerusalem and started to discuss with the Israelis at that time. So the Syrians completely went mad, and the clashes started again against the Christians in Lebanon, if you want. So when these clashes took the stand, or the Syrians started to talk about, started to fight against the Christians in Lebanon, and they started to talk a lot about the Anschluss of Lebanon, which is the how you call it,
to annex.
Yeah, annexation, sorry. It's good I have Makram close by, you know. So the annexation of Lebanon to Syria, because they never recognized Lebanon as an independent country. And at that time, we never had diplomatic relations with Syria, because Syria always refused to have a diplomatic relation with Lebanon, which was considered as being one part of Syria at that time. So things have started to change, and slowly, the mentality started to change. And we felt at that time that there were a lot of Muslims starting to think like we are thinking. And the Muslims felt that they were very close to the Christians, much more than with the people who were not Lebanese at that time. And this is why things started to shift. This is why the Mufti was assassinated at a certain time in Lebanon, because he started to think that, no, we have to create links with our brothers who are in Lebanon. And the mentality started to change. And until when we reached 1990, the major battles which were fought between Christians against Christians, Druze against Shia against, etc. So later on, I believe things has completely changed and went out of hand. So the problem came out to be later on as a power struggle between the different leaders within each community. And this is how 1990 came to the end of the war. We saw the end of the war with the Taif agreement, which was somehow imposed on Lebanon.
Okay, sir, I would like to hear your explanation about this idea that we have a lot of scholars like Professor Farid Al-Khazin that says that the main problem was the PLO, or the Arab-Israeli conflict was too much. At the same time, we read many people that say, and because you work with development and you go to Baalbek a lot, the peripheries were underdeveloped. And this is why a lot of people did not feel Lebanese. They did not feel as part of the system. This is why they were swept up by the pro-Nasser rhetoric in the 1950s. And this is why in the 1970s, they were willing to destroy the state that did not look like them. So do you think that if the PLO wasn't there, this was enough? Because we saw that the Shahabi experiment of state building was successful, but at the same time, it brought us the Deuxième Bureau, and it eventually brought us, as we all read in class, guys, Slimane Frangi, which to some was the actual start of the civil war because of all the factors that we talked about. I would like to hear your impressions on that.
All of the above, definitely. And you have to add, of course, the problems between the disparities within the different areas, the cultural issues, the education level, the lack of development, you name it, everything is there, you know. And also because we realized ourselves, when we started to think that, why have we gone to war? Why have we destroyed our country? Why are we killing each other, you know? is it a matter of having, 50-50 power sharing in Lebanon? Why don't we do it? So we started to think about this, and every time we were trying to reach out for the counterpart, there were always a sponsor who was coming in the middle, and he said, "Stop, guys! You are not allowed to talk directly to each other. You have to go through us." At a certain time, it was Yasser Arafat. Later on, it was the Syrian, and later on, it was the Israelis. It was every time there was someone who was trying to tell us, "No, you have to remain killing each other because we have not taken ourselves what we came here to Lebanon to take." And this is when we came to realize that we started maybe a war, or someone has pushed us to start a war, because until now we never understood how this happened, why people came on the 13th of April to try to assassinate Pierre Gemayel, and they killed his bodyguard. How come 1 hour later a bus filled of Palestinian armed people were passing through the same area, which was a Christian area? Who was the policeman who redirected the bus to go through this area, etc., etc.? So definitely there were a major manipulation. Who was the head of, or the chef d'orchestre of this manipulation? So there are a lot of dark areas which are not yet clear until now. But later on, the Lebanese understood that we were going into really a mad spiral, and we had to stop it somewhere. So every time we tried to stop this, there were always someone who was coming to remind you, "Listen, guys, we are the guy who are paying you, who are arming you, who supposedly are defending you. You cannot go directly, you have to go through us, whether the Israelis, whether the Syrians, or the Palestinians." And this is why Lebanese, we came out to be the weakest part in Lebanon. And it's the strangers who were fighting in Lebanon. They said, "We have rights now in Lebanon. We need to take our rights first."
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Fouad. I will open up the floor to questions, but before we do this, let me take Maha and Maher already asked. The first part is that Dr. Fouad has an NGO called Nawraj, which does development and does outreach. It's not a political party, and
especially in the peripheral areas.
Peripherals, yeah. And it doesn't have a political agenda. As for, Maha was asking about Bashir Gemayel being kidnapped by the Palestinians.
Yeah, he was kidnapped in 1969 by the Palestinians of Tal Zatar, and they returned him. He was with 2 of his friends, and one of his friends was shot in his stomach. And yes, he was returned later on. Yes.
Okay, so Maher, tfaddal, can you ask the doctor directly? It would be better. Smani Maher?
Hi, doctor.
Hello.
I just want to ask, why didn't all the Christians take the same perspectives as the Kataib party?
It was a survival issue. When Abu Ayyad came and said that the road goes through Juni and we are going to throw you to the sea, so everybody felt they have to be Kataib at that time, even though they hated the Kataib maybe, but they felt that when it comes to survival, when it comes that you have to, you are afraid for your family, you are afraid for your country. Yes, of course, everybody turned out to be at that time that they were looking for someone to help them, of course.
But also remember, guys, that there was diversity within different parties. Even when we talk about the Muslim leftist elements, we had people who saw differently. So within the right-wing Christian camp, we had the National Liberal Party, we had the National Bloc, which did not get involved in the civil war, for example.
Absolutely.
And we had different variations. So although the Kataib and later on the Lebanese forces unified the Christians by force, there was still diversity, in addition to the fact that although Dr. Abu Nader might be using sectarian language, back then it was about ideology. The Maronite political establishment wasn't Maronite. It has a combination of different people, and Bashir Gemayel ultimately, to come to power, he had to appease his different allies many of them were originally anti right wing, Islam and such people. They had to work hard to get the vote of the other people. And I would like to hear
Yes.
your.
Yes, I would like to come back to this because, of course, I'm maybe using a very strong language because I'm a direct guy, you know. So I say things out of my, you know.
No, it makes sense. But
Yeah, yes, but I want to tell you something, you know. When we came at towards the end of the war, 1990, it was at that time شو الحروب العباسية.
It was Abbas is.
You know, all the wars that we're still fighting, we felt that it was not necessary anymore, and it was stupid,
absurd.
Yeah, absurd. Yes, and we all felt like that. You know, whether we were Druze or Christian or Sunni or Shia, we felt that it was, you know, the wars were mainly fueled by foreign powers, just to keep the power game, just to be able to cash in on at the end. You know, in 1990, when the war stopped, with a lot of friends who were fighting like me, we sat down and we thought together about what have we done with our country? Why have we gone through this war? Why we have destroyed our country, you know? And we came back and we thought that at the end, we could have done this totally differently by staying with the others and telling them, come, let's really share the power in this country. Let's be 50-50 in everything. Let's try to build something new, a new mentality, because we inherited from our parents, who inherited from their parents, the very old, you know, in their DNA, the very old problems that used to happen between the different communities. So why are we obliged to perpetuate this? Why we are obliged to continue in this mentality? And at this time, we made a lot of contacts with the people who were fighting against us, whether in the Druze with the PSP, whether with the Amal, later on with Hezbollah. And we made a lot of discussions with this group, and we found out that it was really stupid. We could have done it totally different, in a different way, you know. Until then, we decided with a group of guys that we have to do the maximum because I want to avoid that my kids would be obliged to do the same thing like I have done, meaning fighting, meaning killing, meaning whatever happened during the war, you know. And we really, I took it personally because I insisted, especially with my kids, that I have 4 kids, they all graduated from AUB anyway, that you have to run your own life. Don't take, okay, you have to learn from the past, but you have to study the past. You should know what happened, but at the same time, you have to learn, and you have to learn that you can make things differently. We are going to help you to make things differently. And we have done a lot of work with the different parties who were fighting against us. And I was saying all the time that there is always something which was missing. This when you make a chemistry reaction, you need this catalyst. And I was wondering, what is this catalyst which is going to really make things work like I used to dream, you know, after 1990, which will create a new model for the Lebanese society, for the different Lebanese mentalities, so we could come all together and create one Lebanon with one, you know, within our differences, to create really one nation, you know, like everybody will feel that he is a real citizen before being a Christian or a Muslim or a Sunni. So this for me was the major challenge. And this happened, I believe this catalyst happened in October 17th, when all the Lebanese came together around one idea. We want a clean, viable Lebanon where everyone can live in this country in dignity, in security, equality with the others. And I believe what happened in the October 17th is the real catalyst which we have to build on.
Okay, we will take Alexander, تفضل. You can ask your question directly.
Okay, so I'm from Damour, and I always hear from people lived the massacre and the civil war in Damour, that the Kataib party had to choose between many villages and places to give up to Palestinians, and they chose to give up Damour for other in return of other places. What do you think about this?
No, it's totally wrong.
One has to remember that Damour was part of a bigger game, or the massacre in Damour and massacres elsewhere were part of a bigger picture. I don't think Dr. Abu Nader will tell us, but I don't think they had the option of choosing.
Yeah, of course. يعني مثل بيقولوا عم بتحملنا كتير يعني we were not that organized, we were not that strong, we didn't know, especially during the Damour period where we were going. We were just a militia, which was, you know, a very primitive militia. You cannot imagine the militia at that time as being an army with the headquarters, with strategy, with no, we didn't. It was not like that at all. It was very primitive and very empirical, you know. No, we didn't have the choice at all to go to make this game at all. And you have to remember Hafiz al-Assad, when he made his speech at the end of 1976 in Syria, he spoke openly that the some Lebanese leaders, and he named them, came to him and told him, you have to do something to help us. And one of the things that you have to do is to open the road to the southern part of Lebanon, and you have to help us take Damour. And openly, Hafiz Assad said that I have sent the Sa'ika. It was the Palestinian army affiliated to the Syrian army to attack Damour and to take Damour. So no, it's true.
But what can you elaborate? Because we also read about the role that Syria played. At the end of the day, Syria in the two-year war was fighting in support of the right-wing group. So I know that you personally were not with this involvement, because later on you and Bashir and the rest of you fought the Syrians in Ashrafiyeh. So what can you tell us about the Syrian role? This is before the Israelis so openly supported you in after 1978.
The Syrians realized at a certain point that the PLO was getting too strong in Lebanon, and that they were able to rally a lot of Lebanese around them. And there were, mainly they were Muslims, but you had a lot of Christians who rallied around the Palestinians at that time and were fighting the Christians. So don't take it. And there were a lot of Muslims who came to fight with us because they thought that this was their place, you know. So don't take it as it was like one pack of Christians against one pack of Muslims. It was not like that, you know. There were a lot of Muslims fighting with us, and a lot of Christians who were fighting against us with the Palestinians. So you have to take it like that. But at a certain time, the Syrians, they had a different agenda in Lebanon than the Palestinians. And the Syrians felt that the Yasser Arafat was getting too strong, and that they had to do something about it. And this is why they started to give us weapons at this time, and they started to give us support on the ground as well. So this is how because we went through very difficult 3-4 months were very difficult for us, and we were losing almost on all the fronts. And when the Syrians got involved with us, at that time we were able to take the lead again on the ground, you know, because of the Syrian. So the Syrian, they had their own agenda. We want to control Lebanon. We don't want to let Yasser Arafat do the job alone. Later on, when in 1982, when the Israelis attacked Lebanon with Sharon and entered in Beirut, and they made they obliged Yasser Arafat to leave Beirut at that time with all the fighters. Yasser Arafat left Beirut and went to Tripoli in the north. So what usually people are saying is that Sharon, through obliged Yasser Arafat to leave Beirut, but it was Hafiz al-Assad who obliged Yasser Arafat and the Palestinian fighters to leave Lebanon and to go to Tunis. So practically speaking, if you want, there were like a tacit agreement between these two regional powers to throw away the Palestinians and Yasser Arafat outside Lebanon.
Please, let's take Mario. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Doctor. My question is that in 1985, Eli Hbaiqa, and after having taken control of the Lebanese forces, he started to defect to Syria.
He did not defect. He started to change the political course of action of the Lebanese forces, where he felt that the Israelis left and we thought that they stabbed us in the back. And at the same time that we didn't want to continue to fight against each other. So he thought that we have to start finding a solution. And this is why he started to speak with the Syrians at that time. I cannot label this as defection, but I would say that he started to think in a pragmatic way.
To be fair, the اتفاق الثلاثي, which was which was supposed to be signed by Eli Hbaiqa and Lebanese forces, was technically approved by the Lebanese forces command. This is according to the memoirs of Asad Shaftari. So maybe Samir Jaja would not admit this, but there was a vote. And I know this because when this vote was about to be cast, someone suggested that Asad Shaftari, because he was Greek Orthodox, leave the room. And another one, maybe someone else was Greek Orthodox as well. This caused a kind of tension. One should not take history at face value. There's a number of details one has to understand. As you mentioned, Mario, in 1985, it was completely different. And to answer one of our friends, Dr. Abu Nader didn't say that the Lebanese forces were not organized, but the 2-year war, the Lebanese forces was not yet officially established, and the crack top militias were not organized then, and this also applied to the left. The left also did not have a standing army. The Lebanese national movement was still trying to rely on the Palestinian PLO. So please do not try to judge what we say. It was 15 years of fighting. It did not happen overnight. This is very important to know. Maha is asking you. Maha is asking you if you fought in Talizatar.
Yes. بس مشان for Eli Hbaiqa, I would like just to emphasize on one issue. At that time, you know, there were a real remise en question, like a real rethinking about the why are we still continuing to fight, etc., you know. So the mood in this period of time, 1985, 1986, was, yes, we have to try to find a solution, you know. So, and when you have to think about a solution, you have to find a solution with your enemy. You cannot, you don't need to find a solution with your friends and with your people who are fighting with you, you know. So you have to go with your enemy. And there were a breakthrough about this at that time. Yes. About Talizatar, yes, I fought in Talizatar. Yes, I almost did all the fightings everywhere in Lebanon.
Remember that the number of people that fought are a minority, basically, but also very important that you had whole communities supporting them. So you would have, let's say, especially at the early days of the war, if you read the details of what was happening, they were certainly, they were buying their own weapons, their own bullets. And this justifies why the foreign powers were able to have more and more sway as
leverage
time went by. When they started collecting taxes and they had support from their own community, this was something else. The militias in Lebanon at a certain stage were a powerful state within the state, be it the Christian militia or the Muslim militia. Amanda, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
I think I heard you say in the beginning that the Palestinians, or the PLO specifically, wanted the disintegration of Lebanon, or that this was the perception of
they
many
wanted to
Lebanese.
control Lebanon.
But, right. But the most successful attempt in reality to create a state within a state or a separate state was the South Lebanon army in South Lebanon and the creation of the Free Lebanon State. So how does this correspond to the self-proclaimed Maronite wish for a united Lebanon, that there is actually a separate state or an attempt for a separate state in South Lebanon under the protectorate of Israel?
You know, yeah, but I didn't understand really the question.
So they accuse the PLO of
Yeah,
establishing a state
state.
within the state, but the real state within the state that even survived the civil war was the Shrit al-Hududi and the South Lebanon Army, be it under Saad Haddad or later Lahad. I know for a fact the Lebanese forces did try to establish presence in the south, but the Kataib, one thing which you need to keep in mind, guys, the Kataib party originally did not cover all of Lebanon. So traditionally, if you were a Christian living in the south, you would be part of the Assad faction, and vice versa. If you were a Shiite living in Brummana, you would be a member of the Kataib. It was not clear-cut sectarianism. Now, if you are a Druze, you would be a member of the PSP. Back then, it depended. I remember one person, I asked him, why did you join the Kataib? Only because their headquarters was next door to us. We grew up being Kataib. This is also something which we have to keep in mind. Further, Doctor.
Yeah, but please clarify your, because I don't see what is the relation between the two.
I wonder what was the stance of the Lebanese forces then? If they were not active in the south, what was the official stance to the sudden creation of a separate state in South Lebanon?
Yeah. First of all, I want to clarify one thing, you know, until 1980, there were no Lebanese forces. It was the militias of the different parties, whether Kataib or PNL or Tanzim, well, all the other different parties that were within the Christian area. So practically speaking, the Lebanese forces started end of, you know, at the mid of 1980. So this is the first thing. Second thing, when the war started in 1975, everyone had his own state, you know. Every area was like a country on its own, you know. They had their own taxes, they have their own radio, their own TV, their own, you know, everything was different after this, you know, because I'm talking about the Palestinians were able to make a state within a state before 1975, when there were still a Lebanese government, Lebanese state. But after 1975, when the Lebanese government was totally neutralized, finished, every militia took over their own area, and they were managing their own area. They were running the police, their own police in their own area, the taxes, etc. So this was the thing at that time. I want to add one thing about this. In the southern part, after, and this has started after the 1976, maybe 1977, end of 1976-77, when the Palestinians tried to stay in the southern part, and they used to continue to attack Israel, but mainly to attack also the villages which were against them. And these villages were Christians and were Shiite at that time. I just want to, I was talking with Makram before we started. You have to see there is an interview with Ahmad Jibril on the Mayadeen TV. And this documentary, I believe, is very interesting for you to read and to listen. Ahmad Jibril, in one of these sessions, said that we took over the southern part of Lebanon, and we were training people there, and we had nothing to do with the Lebanese army. We were strong in the Lebanese army, etc. And he said two things. One is that the first one is that they were training people. The second thing, that at a certain period of time, he said, and this was before 1975, when we sent our logistical guy to go and buy food for our fighters at that in this place, we used to go to the Shiite villages to buy food, and the guys there refused to sell us food because they were fed up with the Palestinian presence in the southern part of Lebanon. The second thing in this documentary is the Mufti of Saida at that time, who was interviewed also, and he said that it's true, we love the Palestinian cause, we were all the Palestinian cause, but at a certain time we were fed up with the Palestinians because they were doing so many problems on the ground, they were doing so many trouble for the people, that people were coming and telling me, please, if Israel can go into Lebanon just to kick out the Palestinians, it will be a good day for us. So At that time, even the Muslim communities, whether Shiite or Sunni, they were so fed up with the Palestinian presence and the Palestinian, troubles they were making, that they were, dreaming of this day that you will be, getting.
Second, and more importantly, we spoke about this. The South was not prepared to be a confrontation front. There was no infrastructure. Now, comparing to what was in 1975, the South is overdeveloped to a certain extent. This also includes Akkar and other places. This is why the sentiment was so much aggressive, because many people believe that the armed presence there was impeding them from progressing into a modern state.
Yes, I want to add one thing, and this is a personal experience. In 1977, we said that we have to keep the Christians there in these areas, and we have sent like a representative of the Kataib party to take care of this area and to run this area, especially not the area of Saad Haddad. Saad Haddad was mainly, he declared, his own republic, Free Lebanon, in Marjayoun area, not in the western side of the south, So he was mainly in the eastern side of the south. So we have sent to try to salvage this area and to keep it, to keep a certain contact with this area. We sent a representative from the Kataib party there. His name was Kamal, and Kamal went there. And he, of course, he had to interact daily with the Israelis at that time, because we were like, it was an enclave, and we were surrounded by by Palestinians from all sides. So at that time, and I can assure it was mainly Palestinians, like 95% Palestinians at that time. So the Israelis came to him and told him, you have to do, Kamal, you have to do this and that. So he said, okay, I have to ask my headquarters in Beirut. So he said it one time. Second time, they told him, listen, my friend, go back to Beirut. We don't need this here. The guy who has to be on ground here in the south, in this enclave, will have to be 100% with us. And he will have to take the orders from us and not from Beirut. And they kicked him out from there. And since then, later on, Saad Haddad took over the whole part of the southern part of Lebanon, in fact.
I will send you the link of the documentary that Dr. Fouad mentioned.
It's very interesting for you to see this, because you will learn a lot.
Okay, so Suhail asks, what was the purpose behind assassinating Kamal Jumlat?
Kamal Jumlat was he has a doctrine, a dogmatic guy, and for him it was the Palestinian cause, and he refused that to see that the Syrians would take over Lebanon, so when the Syrians made a whole agreement, that the agreement was with the Americans, mind you, not with the Russians, even though they were in the Russian camp, but the agreement was with the Americans. When they entered into Lebanon in 1976, they entered under the American umbrella. It's important for you to understand this. Even though they were supposedly against the Americans and in the Soviet camp. So they decided to enter into Lebanon, and it was seen by the Palestinians that the Arab dissuasive Arab deterrent force that entered at that time, which was 90% composed from the Syrian army, like 30,000 Syrian armed troops, with maybe 10,000 from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, etc. So they were mainly Syrian army. At that time, it was the perception here in Lebanon was that this army deterrent force, Arab deterrent force, was entering into Lebanon mainly against the Palestinians and to curb the Palestinian influence in Lebanon. And Kamal Jumlat refused this, and openly he refused this. And when there were clashes between the Syrian army and the Palestinians, Kamal Jumlat stood with the Palestinians at that time. And he remained like a rebel against the
compromise.
Yeah, the compromise or the fait accompli. So this was, and he was summoned to go to Damascus. He went to Damascus, And Hafiz Assad explained to him plainly that you have to abide by this regulation, by the rules. He refused, and he was assassinated.
Apparently, it turned out that he was right. He knew that the Syrians
Absolutely.
were here to establish a hegemony over Lebanon, and this is why a year later you would clash with them.
Absolutely.
Okay, let us. Okay, so Mario, I'll go back to your question, but I want to hear someone else, please. Other than Mario. Who would like to ask a question, guys? Did I miss anything before? Anyone would like to direct a question?
I see.
We will go on for, let's say, 5 more minutes.
Okay, let me ask you a question. How do you perceive what we have done during the war? How do you perceive us as fighters at that time?
So, guys, what do you think? Being born, most of you are born, all of you are born after the end of the Civil War. How do you look at people like Fouad Abi Nader and Ziad Saab and many other people who might be remorseful or still abide by what they did? I would like to. Okay, but Noor and Maha, go ahead, Noor. Ask your question again. Maha says here she could never understand why fighters did what they did, no matter what the circumstances were.
We need a total, it's very important. I think Dr. Makram can go through this, because it's very important to understand all the small details and the atmosphere at that time, You cannot just judge like this,
Okay, so also Noor Harmoush asked before, what do you think of the 17 Ayar, the Israeli-Lebanese peace deal, which never actually was never ratified by parliament, so technically we never signed it.
Yes, practically we never signed it. The right thing that could have happened at that time would have been that both Syrian and Israeli armies would have to withdraw, both of them, from Lebanon at that time. Unfortunately, things were so bad between the Israelis and us, as the Christians, between the Israelis and the Americans, between the Syrians, and it was really a big mess at that time. And the game was not at all in our hands as Lebanese at that time, with this period of time. So this, we went later on to this agreement between the Israelis and the Lebanese, and it was so built on fake intentions, so everybody was trying to do something, knowing that this something will never work, And I believe it was not the right thing to do, because at the end, it turned out to be really
Okay. There's something which is controversial I would like to ask you about. Whenever you hear anyone who has been involved in the war, and particularly the Lebanese forces, the first thing that you are accused of is Sabra and Shatila, which is a very bad experience and a terrible tragedy, because and one question that was asked, don't you think that this hatred that was directed towards the Palestinians as people, not as PLO, was actually very harmful for the Lebanese, because many factions at the moment still use this xenophobic approach to the Lebanese and to the Syrian refugee or the Palestinian refugee. So I would like to hear you, and if you can be very blunt when it comes to this.
First of all, I would like to give you my personal feeling that it was really a very, very, very sad tragedy. At that time, you remember it was on a Tuesday, the 14th of September, Bashir was assassinated. And Bashir was like a hope for not only Christians, but for Muslims as well, you know. And people went mad at that time. So even though Bashir was my uncle, and being a responsible, the military responsible on the ground, the military, I am not responsible of the intelligence part of the Lebanese forces, you know, of the regular troops at that time. So I felt that my duty was not to go to the funerals of Bashir and not to go to and be there, because being part of the family, I had to be there. You know, the habits in Lebanon to receive the condolences of the people who were coming to condole us. So I felt that my role was to be with the people on the ground. This is why I went the next day, on Wednesday, Thursday, until Friday. I made a tour of all our barracks, of all our soldiers on the fronts, because I felt that I had to be with them to boost their morale, to condole them, because they felt that Bashir was a great loss for them, you know. And I remember I went to on the front on the Biblos Jbel area, and the mountain of Jbel, the Jord of Jbel. I went there like one bunker to the other, you know. And there is one of the soldiers, when he looked at me, he was crying like a baby. So I waited for him until he finished. I tapped on his shoulder like this, and I left. So this is to tell you the ambiance at that time. You know, everybody was so frustrated and so angry about what happened. You know. So when I came back on Friday to the headquarters, the thing about the tragedy of Sabra and Shatila had happened already. And at that time, all I had to do, I took the orders from my chief at that time, who was Fadi Frame, and he told me, close all the roads going down to West Beirut, because there were a lot of people who went back to West Beirut, especially the people coming in the area from the area of Mreiji, the area close to the airport, which is called
كوكودي وليلكي وهول
بس ضيعت ميشيل عون
حارة تحريك.
حارة تحريك. So people from حارة تحريك went back to حارة تحريك. So we had to go there and bring them out, close all the roads going to the airport to حارة تحريك, and to stop any contact with the people. So this is my personal experience. The second thing, in all our plans and discussions with Bashir before the Israeli invasion, and of course, everybody knew that someday the Israelis are going to enter into Lebanon, especially the Palestinians, they knew this, you know. We always said that whatever happens, whatever the Israelis will do, we will never connect with them and go with them into any military action. Bashir didn't want us at all to get involved militarily with the Israelis, at all. So this is the second thing. The third thing I want to tell you, all the time in all our planification as well, Bashir said, wait until if I can reach to be the president of the republic at that time, give me the time to organize the Lebanese army, and it's the Lebanese army who will go into the camps and will remove the weapons from the camps. It will be the Lebanese army who will go to the mountain where the Druze are. It will be the Lebanese army who will go to the other areas, because it will be accepted. Why the Lebanese forces cannot be accepted in this area? So in any planification, it was never meant, we were never meant neither to enter to Beirut, because we had nothing to do in West Beirut. We had nothing to do in the camps. We had nothing to do in any place where we didn't, logically we had to be there. So it was all the time, wait until the Lebanese army can do the job. So this may be answers to your question.
Chloe, تفضلي please.
Hello. I wanted to ask, at some point you talked about, for your children, you wanted to kind of make the young generation aware of what happened in the war. Now we see like a certain revivement of the young generation and their this ideology with the Sawra and everything. And we're also seeing a debate of whether we should actually use violent means or not to reach a certain endpoint now. So seeing that you have fought in the war and you've been and you've witnessed all of these violent measures and where ideologies can take you, what would you say to the generation these days who are using or consider using violent means?
Violent means won't solve the issue and won't find solutions, because violence will be opposed by violence from the other side, a reaction and a counter reaction, and it will never end. Let's learn from the past, from the very sad past that we have gone through. It was very difficult. Do believe me, it's not easy to take your friends to the grave, you know, and to bury them, you know. It's not easy at all. So no, violence is very bad. We should not go into violent act at all. We can achieve the same thing by peaceful means, and I believe this will be much stronger, and a peaceful mean will be heard all over the world much better than a violent way of doing things. So what I would advise, and I have been from day one since 2015, you know, I have been on the ground with the people, with the demonstrations, when it started first with the garbage thing, you know, and later on when it started on the 17th of October, I was every day there on the ground, and I was discussing with the youngsters, and maybe I was the only one who had the military and political past, who was never, you know, who was accepted by the people on the ground, you know, during these demonstrations. And I was explaining to them, and I was giving a testimony about how I felt about things, about the war, what I have done, and what I am doing for to avoid my kids to do the same things, you know. And I definitely tell you, go with a peaceful mean, because you will reach your target definitely much easier.
Yes, Layla, تفضلي.
Good evening, Doctor. In the beginning, you were saying, you know, the 18 communities that are in Lebanon were a liability. And
sorry, can you repeat, please?
Yeah, I'm saying in the beginning, you told us that the 18 communities were a liability to Lebanon.
Yes.
And they didn't really agree on the future of Lebanon. Do you believe now with the revolution that there is in fact more agreement? Although a lot of people are saying that the revolution is not very organized and like there's no representation whatsoever. So do you really think that the sects in general do see a common future and a common way to implement that vision?
Well, I have to ask you, because you, the youngsters today, the young Lebanese today, you have to decide on this. Because either you go and you say, no, it's in our DNA, we cannot change it, or yes, we can change it. And we can change it, then we don't want to inherit your stupid things, your stupid ideas, you, the old guys like me. We want to build our own Lebanon with our own ideas. And we want to prove to you that things can be done differently. I believe this is your challenge, actually. And I started by saying, yes, it was a liability in the 1975, because, of course, it was the ingredients of divisions were there, you know. But today it can be a very beautiful thing, because it can be a very beautiful model for the whole world, that 18 crazy communities were able to find a common ground to build one country for everybody. So everybody can live in dignity, in security, in equality with the other people, and not to have to worry about all these things. Just to give you a small hint about it, you know, with the internal problems that they had in Iraq, the solution they found was what? Was to make like a division, you know, a power sharing like in Lebanon. So the president is a Kurdish, the head of the parliament is Sunni, and the head of the government is Shia. So they said, Lebanon has made this, you know, it has been working so and so, let's try it. You know, Lebanon has been an example in this. And I believe we can build today a new model which could be viable and everybody can copy it in the future.
Which is based on citizenship rather than
absolutely,
identities.
100%.
I would like to ask a question from Naji. He was following us on Facebook, which is relevant. And he asks here, you as a Christian, do you belong to the Ta'if?
mentality, or do you believe to the alliance of minorities that we hear about? Is the Christians of Lebanon better off being a minority or being part of a, although the Ta'if agreement, as you mentioned, was forced upon Lebanon, the idea of equality is sound, and you were actually contemplating this at the stage, because Bashir Jmayil felt that the system has to be strong, but the Christians cannot be stronger than the Muslims because this will disrupt the system, right?
Absolutely.
So where do you stand on the Ta'if versus the alliance of minorities debate?
I want to go back first of all to Bashir experience. You know, at that time we were strong. When Bashir was there, our militia was the strongest on the ground, and we started to have strong, allies abroad. You know, at that time, because when we started, nobody wanted to hear about us. And Bashir had the opportunity at a certain period of time. A lot of Christians came to tell him, "Let's make a Christian country. Let's live alone and let's finish with the Muslims." He said, "No. It doesn't mean anything for me to have a small Christian enclave like this, living like that, you know." And this is how he came out with the slogan of the 10,452 square kilometer. And he really believed in this. And, you know, at that time, the Amal newspaper, that's put in the front page that Bashir died because of this slogan, because he believed in the slogan. And the strongest thing that Bashir has done during 21 days is what Jamil Sayed has said like a month ago. Jamil Sayed, he said, "I don't like Bashir Jmayil, I'm against him, but I can recognize one thing that Bashir has done. When he became a president for these 21 days, everybody was going back to his work at 8 o'clock sharp. Nobody was taking any bribes. Everybody wanted to go to queue, to be online. The policeman was respected. The army man was respected." And he said, Bashir has made a revolution even before taking over the presidency. So I believe this was the real thing that Bashir wanted, is to go beyond the borders, to go to the Muslims, speak to them and tell them what's going to be right for the Christians is going to be right for you. What is wrong for you will be wrong for the Christians as well. And this is the basis of the Bashir philosophy, unfortunately.
Maha pointed out the fact that Bashir used to say that bureaucrats will go to work at 7, although work starts at 8.
Yes.
And the idea here, there's a lot of speculation. What if Bashir survived? Would you have been able to demobilize the militias and incorporate them into your understanding of what Lebanon should be in 1982 particularly?
This was Bashir's target anyway. He said, "I want to integrate the Lebanese forces, not only the armed forces, but also the civilians who were working with him, within the government, because I want to insufflate a new mentality in the government of you don't accept a bribe, you come to work early, you work hard, you want to create a new educational system, you want to have roads, not every Bashir wanted to go against the corrupt system, against the sectarian system. It's not because I want to give you I want to buy your loyalty, and so I'm going to give you a sewage system in your area. This is finished with Bashir. Everybody is going to get everything. We want to make a modern country. So this was the main aim of Bashir, and he definitely wanted to disband the Lebanese forces, and he wanted to integrate what he could integrate within the government, and also to reintegrate the people within the private sector as well. I want to say something about Taif. What shocked me in Taif, okay, we went there Christians because we had a gun on our head, and we were obliged to accept things which would have never accepted otherwise. Anyway, this is not the issue. The issue is that the politicians who went to Taif, who were politicians and deputies since 1972, they went to Taif just to make any agreement and come back to business, to make, to cut the cheese, to take the part of each one will take the part of cheese, and business as usual. What shocked me is that they understood nothing to the 15 years that we have spent in the very tough years that we have spent during the 15 years that of the war, you know. They have not understood that a new mentality was born, you know. Unfortunately, they have not tried at all to ask themselves why we have done this war, why we have spent 15 years killing each other, why we have destroyed our country. We have not done what they have done in South Africa when they made this special committee, Truth and Reconciliation. Can we restart in a new life in this country if you don't really go to the past and make this Truth and Reconciliation, you know, agreement between us, just to see why this happened, why we made all these killings, all these destructions? We have not done this. And this is why we have been living in denial since then. And this is why things came out of hand, almost came out of hand in 2008 with the 7th of May, with the clash which happened between the Hezbollah at the time and Shiite and the Sunnis from the other side, as if things would, as if we have not you know, understood anything to what happened in Lebanon. You know. Yes, we have to do it, and you youngsters, you have to start oblige our generation to sit, not to apologize. This is not it, because everyone was fighting for his own cause. He believed in his cause, and he was ready to die for this cause. He has nothing to apologize. But what we have to do is recognize what happened and to decide what we should do so this cannot repeat in the future. And this, we have not done it at all. And this is why we are still living in a country, unstable country until today.
Okay, Mustafa, could you go ahead, please? And then I will give the last question to Maha, and then we can conclude. Tfaddal, Mustafa.
Hello, Doctor. I wanted to ask you, what do you think would have happened in the civil war if the Syrian army didn't enter in 1976?
Maybe in the same atmosphere, maybe we would have lost the war at that time, maybe.
Okay, thank you.
But remember, this was not an option. This is something which we asked Ziad Saab when he joined us last time. Hafs al-Assad would never have given up Lebanon, even if the Lebanese front were not welcoming of the Syrian quote-unquote interference. He would have invaded anyways.
Of course, he started to invade even though before the deterrent Arab force that they have organized. You know that he entered in the Bekaa and the northern part of Lebanon, and he was running the part of the country even before this, you know. So they were already in Lebanon. He had like 30 to 40,000 troops at that time in Lebanon. And he said, well, for him, his agenda was not just to break the Christian militias, just to break them. No, he wanted to break anyone who was refusing the annexation of Lebanon. This was the mentality of the Ba'ath party in Syria. And this is why they entered into Lebanon.
Okay, Maha, go ahead, please. Can you ask a question? And then Mario, and then we conclude.
Hi, sir.
Hi, Maha.
Hello.
Doctor, do you really think that the revolution and us, do you think we will really be able to make a change when we have an armed opponent that are in control of everything in this country?
But they cannot kill everybody in this country. I'm sorry. And you have to be really determined. And this question, you have to ask it yourself. Are you ready to fight for the ideal Lebanon that you want for the future, for you and for your kids in the future?
But
And
they won't.
so
They're okay with them being
they cannot do it again. And if they do it again this time, they cannot kill everybody and they cannot put everybody in jail. Do believe me, it's very difficult to fight against people determined who want to
Here we're not talking about violence, we're talking about peaceful struggle.
Peaceful struggle, definitely.
Mario,
believe in yourself, Maha. Believe in yourself and you can achieve it. Do believe me. It's difficult. The path is not easy, but we know in Lebanon that we are resilient. We are quite resilient, and we know exactly that when we want something, We can move mountains, and do believe me, you can do it.
One thing which you should keep in mind, that this clientelist system, which has been operational since 1943, has simply collapsed because the system does not work. Lebanon's neutrality is important for its economy. So if we do not adopt a new method, you cannot shoot at poverty. You can use your weapons to do virtually everything except what we are going through right now. The coronavirus is not the reason why we are in such a terrible condition. It is because we abused a system which needs to change, a system which could incorporate everyone and basically be respected by people like you. People who are above 40 might accept to live under the system, which I don't believe they are willing anymore. But people like you have no understanding nor willingness to even talk about a system that does not push you forward, right? This is what I actually believe, and this is why we took part in the October 17 as an institution and as individuals.
I fully agree.
Mario, you are the last question, so make it count, right? Don't ask us detailed questions. I want something with a thematic approach, please. Tfaddal, Mario.
Professor, dear doctor, my question is, in 1990, with the end of the Ta'if, Samir Jasha had been accused of assassinating Dani Sham'on and an explosion in the church. Was these accusations real, or was Syria trying to get rid of him? And if they were trying to get rid of him, why not just assassinate him rather than imprison him?
Well, for the first part of your question, I leave it to the judges to say their word. I believe there are things that are built on concrete realities and things which are not. So I have my own opinion, of course, which I don't want to debate here because I prefer that to leave it for the legal system in Lebanon. Which I believe at that time there were definitely very good judges at that time, and people who could not be influenced. The second part of your question, why they did not assassinate him? Because in their own beliefs, they can maybe use the, these people, they think differently. They don't think like you and me, for them, they want to keep always a certain equilibrium so they can separate
divide and conquer.
Yeah, divide and conquer, divide and make, So this is what the main aim of the Syrians is always this, They want within the Christian communities to keep a certain tension between the Christian leaders so they can control them better. Same thing in the Druze, same thing in the Shia, same thing in the Sunni. So this happened in all over Lebanon. If you remember the clashes between Hezbollah and Amal, it was very nasty clashes. I mean, after 1990. And it was when the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Iranian Foreign Affairs Minister who came to Lebanon, who set out with Khaddam at that time, and they made a special agreement, and the war stopped between the Shia themselves. They want to keep the same thing between the Sunni, the same thing between the Druze, and this was the major aim of the Syrians.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Fouad. Thank you everyone for watching, and people who are on Facebook. Again, this is part of the History of Lebanon class based on readings. We are not trying to promote any political agenda, and Dr. Abi Nader's approach was to try to benefit everyone from his own experience, as well as to open up a debate. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you, Dr. Fouad, and I'll talk to you over the WhatsApp group. Have a nice evening and be safe.
Thank you. Bye.